Critical Role's original channel, Geek and Sundry, has returned, and in a huge way. A few months ago, I made this video. Now we talked about the history of Geek and Sundry, as well as the many purchases by parent companies that it had throughout its lifetime, and we talked about its eventual recession due to the absence of Critical Role. And at the end of that video, I left a little footnote that I would love to see Geek and Sundry return to the spotlight someday. And it looks like I got my wish. Sagas of Sundry Goblin Mode is a 20-episode mini-series about a D&D adventure that is being released right now on Geek and Sundry. It's about a ragtag group of former minions to the Dark Lord who have to find their own way in a strange new world beyond their dungeon. Now, it's hosted by Amy Vorpahl, a legendary figure in the D&D community. And guess what? We have an exclusive interview with Amy on this episode right now. So sit back, relax, and let's go Goblin Mode. Howdy folks, my name is Sean and welcome back to Delver. I'm going to talk about our sponsor real quick. Look, everybody in my community knows my stance on sponsorships. I like to show off really awesome shit going on in the community. And that's why I reached out to 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺, another D&D YouTuber, to show off his third annual side quest Kickstarter. Now look, this project is already fully funded, and it includes over 20 new monsters, over 30 new magic items, and a whole host of world building tools, factions, and new player options like ancestries. Now look, if that interests you, go ahead and check it out with the link in the description. And hey, if you end up supporting it, not only do you get the kick-ass product from 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺, but you also help support this channel here. All right. Enough of that, back to the video. Geek and Sundry was a massively popular YouTube channel that came about in the mid-2010s. It had a variety of really awesome popular shows, including Wil Wheaton's Tabletop. In my last video, I saw a lot of comments about people who thought that I was downplaying the impact that Tabletop had on tabletop gaming, as well as its history in Geek and Sundry, so let me be clear. Tabletop was a huge fucking deal. Besides being one of the shows that immediately caught people's attention on the YouTube platform, it inspired an epidemic of board gaming across the globe. Some people even attribute to the show something called the tabletop effect, which is basically where local game stores would suddenly be out of a game once it was covered on the show because so many people would go out and buy it now that they knew how to play. Plus, the show led to the creation of International Tabletop Day, which started in 2013 and since then has had participation in over 60 countries across the world. Now, Geek and Sundry was a powerhouse for the geek and fandom community here on YouTube and abroad. They covered things like Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, of course, and video games. Now, unfortunately, Geek and Sundry isn't that channel anymore, but it still has a team working at LDN behind the scenes. And that is exactly how Sagas of Sundry Goblin Mode came to be.
So this is what actually happened was Dan Casey at Nerdist and Geek and Sundry came to me and this was the pitch. So he was like, hey, do you want to dungeon master a game where we're minions? And I was like, yes, I do. So I didn't come up with it, and I have to give all the credit to Dan for at least the theme and the concept. And they also named it Goblin Mode. Like this was all very... This was all, I don't want to say it was packaged because I got to build the world and do whatever I wanted to do. It was just that the Goblin Mode and the concept was predetermined in the best way possible, but yeah.
Goblin Mode follows a group of minions who are left alive in the aftermath of a dungeon raid by the 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺. I really hope I'm getting that name correct.
Yes, for the 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺. And they all hoot and holler, the 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺, the 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺.
There's Tippy, the nervous goblin artificer, played by Jason Wen.
I swear I set this trap and I don't understand how we got here, but Phibbs, let me climb on your shoulders.
Then there's Phibbs, who is a skeleton wizard who dresses a little bit more like a warrior, and that's played by Dan Casey.
Ah, geez, I wonder if they're on like a field trip or something. Usually there's like thousands of little baby spiders in here. I don't know, I can't really count them, but I usually go by the eyeball.
And Busy, the College of Clipboard bard skeleton, played by Danielle Radford.
Oh, that's nice. That's actually...
Oh, that's a fantastic parody.
You guys, that's not a song.
When you play D&D, not when you're not a dungeon master, when you're playing, are you more of a minion or are you more of a hero?
Do you want to answer that question? You think I'm giving minion? I'm giving mother. I'm giving father. I'm giving the boss. I'm in charge. We're playing, no, I'm a full-on hero. I step into protagonist role like birthday suit. Like it is where I live, baby.
Now, this group of minions, without a purpose and without any of their co-workers, now have to venture out into the world which they don't really remember or know, and have to go on a series of misadventures to kind of find themselves.
The way they chose to go, it was like when episode 3 is out, you'll see that they choose a place to go. I had planned for them to go to somewhere else. The place they actually choose to go, I had planned for episode 16 and 17 and 18. And it was like, okay, I guess I'm no longer in charge.
If you're as excited about this as I am and looking to get some more of that Geek and Sundry content, I highly recommend starting with this series. Amy Vorpahl is both a master of the dungeon table, if you get it, and she's also a veteran of Geek and Sundry from its heyday. I did want to ask, so Geek and Sundry, where this is being hosted, is the original home to a lot of legendary shows like Critical Role, other Sagas of Sundry productions. For you coming into that space with Goblin Mode and working with the team to create it, what was that like?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I was at Geek and Sundry. So yeah, it was just a returning home. It was like, I worked at Nerdist and Geek and Sundry and Alpha when that was a thing. And that was my full-time job for a long time. And I called it, they used the whole buffalo of Amy. I was a writer, I was a producer for their variety shows and comedy shows, but I also was a dungeon master and a RPG player. And this was just like, Dan and a few other people are kind of the skeleton crew that are left from there. And so it did feel like, oh, we get to hang out and like make stuff again together. This is just like the old days. I knew a little bit of the history, so there wasn't like this pressure to be Sagas of Sundry as we know it, with like these huge sets and like escape room vibes. And that wasn't the show we were making. And technically they only added Sagas of Sundry because of legal reasons. The Goblin Mode just by itself is already trademarked, believe it or not. And I don't know who trademarked it, but you can't name something Goblin Mode. You have to name it like Goblin Mode. So they just chose Sagas of Sundry because that was like an entity they already owned. But it all was born of bureaucracy. But no, from the beginning it was like, oh, do you want to run basically a D&D game for everybody? And I was like, boy, do I. And the building is different, like the geography of where we played, all very different from the old days. And the future of it is still a big question mark too. Obviously, I think Legendary Digital Networks wants to capitalize on this audience that they had built and just hadn't nurtured in a while. And this is definitely their first foray into that. I think everyone's hoping that this continues, but it is actually still a big question mark too.
In my last video, there was an unfettered outpour of support toward Geek and Sundry. Now, I don't know if my video had anything to do with it, probably not, but I'm glad to know that I had some part in injecting excitement back into the community for Geek and Sundry content. Plus, seeing such a detailed and incredible reintroduction to this company right after a video that I made, it's something really special to me. And that's the whole video. Now, if you want to see the full interview with Amy Vorpahl, you can go ahead and look in the description below for a link, or you could just go to my channel. It's going to be uploaded at the same time as this video. She was an absolute gem to speak with, and I highly recommend going and watching it if you love all things Amy Vorpahl and D&D. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.